Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So let's continue with 4 MRA arguments that actually have a point and where they go wrong by Susanna Weiss. But before we get back to the article, let me start by making a correction to the last video in this series. I said almost 1/3 of the deaths due to domestic violence are male. It's actually closer to 1/4. So you could say somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3, but closer to 1/4, as someone pointed out in the comment section. So that's a fair point, and I figure I should make that correction. And one other thing I wanted to bring up last video, but didn't get around to it, is this. Here in Australia we actually have domestic violence shelters for pets. Now that might sound like a strange thing, but there is an actual point to it, and it makes perfect sense. So imagine you're a woman in a domestic violence situation, and you have a pet dog or a cat, and you're forced to flee and leave the dog or the cat behind. It's quite possible that your violent partner could take out his anger and frustration on the pet, and it may actually prevent some people from leaving because they don't want their pet being hurt. So it does actually make perfect sense to have places to house your pets while you're in a domestic abuse shelter. As we see in this article here, life-saving Victorian domestic violence pet shelter program struggling to meet high demand. The organisers of a life-saving domestic violence program in Victoria say they are struggling to meet the high demands on their service, meaning women and children are staying in high-risk and violent homes for longer. And there's been a bit of a push to get these started all over the place. Once again, in essence, I don't think it's a bad idea, and I think there's a place for it. My issue is that currently there seems to be more domestic violence places for pets than there are for men. Here in Australia, if you're a male victim of domestic abuse and you're looking for help, what happens is you get referred to services for abusers.
I was ostracised from family and friends. I was constantly told that even my own family didn't want anything to do with me because I was mentally ill. I just turned around and I looked to see if there was a truck coming down the road because I would have just jumped in front of that truck. A lot of shame. There was a lot of numbness. I went through a lot of depression. Rang up the Department of Community Services, and I was told by a woman on the end of the phone, "Sorry, I don't believe you because only men abuse women. You don't fit into any of our programs, we need you to do an anger management course." And I said, my ex spat at me, she threatened me with knives, she bit me, she punched me, she withheld money, she verbally abused me, and you're telling me I need to do an anger management course. It's hard to admit that you're in an abusive situation to begin with, because society says that females don't abuse men.
Now we're talking about victims here who are being referred to services for abusers because they're male. The only help for men is if you're an abuser, not if you're a victim. So we are actually putting the lives of pets above the lives of men. We are prioritising the safety of pets above the lives of men here in Australia. Now, there is one common argument which I've heard from some feminists, reasonably common. It's not like said by every feminist, but I've heard it more than a few times. And that is, there are plenty of spots for men. They're called homeless shelters. Okay. So if a male is a victim of domestic abuse, his option is to go to a homeless shelter, and according to these feminists, that's a good option, right? That gets the thumbs up. Nothing wrong with that. Perfect. Okay. Let's shut down female domestic abuse shelters then, and we'll make them go to homeless shelters as well, right? Oh no, that would be a bad idea. Now, I'm not actually advocating shutting down female domestic abuse shelters. I'm just trying to make a point. I actually want there to be shelters for men. But it's an incredible double standard to say that it's okay for men to go to homeless shelters. That's perfectly fine, but it's not acceptable for that option to be available for women. They need special services. So let's explore that mentality for a second. The way I see it, there's two possible reasons why they would have this double standard. Neither of these possibilities are very good for feminism, by the way. So the first possibility why feminists have this double standard when it comes to men going to homeless shelters instead of domestic abuse shelters is that they think women are weaker than men. So a man and a woman have been through a terrible situation. They have no choice but to flee their home. The woman needs special help because she's a woman. But the man, well, he doesn't really need much help. He can do it by himself because he's a man, right? He should just be able to bounce back and he'll be on his feet in no time because, you know, he's a man and men are stronger than women, right? According to this mentality. Now, this actually goes against what feminists believe because they say that they're, you know, trying to empower women and women are just as strong and capable as men. In which case, why do you treat women with kid gloves and treat men with no empathy, right? It's a strange double standard if you're trying to empower women. Of course, the other possibility is that they just don't give a shit about men. Don't give two fucking shits whatsoever. And the excuse, well, they can go to homeless shelters, is just that. It's a fucking excuse. They know that there is an issue with not enough spaces for men in domestic abuse shelters. And instead of actually trying to do something about it, or, you know, say maybe this is a problem we should fix, and maybe, you know, agreeing with those nasty MRAs about something, instead they make excuses because they don't really give a shit about what happens to men. They'd probably be up in arms if a domestic abuse pet shelter was shut down or defunded. But, you know, men, fuck 'em, right? Now, some feminists are really honest about this, and they admit that they're only in it for women's issues, right? Their focus is women's issues, and that's it. And although I don't think that's the best way to go about things, at least I respect them for being honest. It's the ones who insist that feminism is equality for everyone and is there to help men and women, and that they don't really need men's rights organisations because feminism will do it for you. Yeah, sure it will. Sure it will. That's why you suggest that men should go to fucking homeless shelters, which are overpopulated and underfunded and don't offer any special services for the men in need. Not to mention that you can't stay there as long. So whenever someone suggests to you that, you know, men should just go to homeless shelters and they don't need any domestic violence shelters, just ask them right out, do you believe women are weaker or you just don't give a shit about men? Because it has to be one of those two. Speaking of which, let's go back to the article, and we're still trying to get through point 1, male survivors should be taken seriously. Now I'm going to try to get through this one and point 2 in this episode. Wish me luck. So I'm actually going to go through a big chunk of text and then reply instead of stopping every 30 seconds. So here we go.
There are also ideologies that lead men to experience sexual violence and intimate partner violence, like that women aren't strong enough to hurt men and that men always want sex and are therefore unrapeable. But there is no societal norm dictating that women should invade men's personal space, make them feel unsafe in public, and treat their bodies like objects. Though the outcome is equally bad, there's a major difference between the beliefs that lead to violence toward men and those that lead to violence toward women and non-binary people. People believe certain forms of violence toward men can't happen, while they believe violence toward other genders is normal and okay.
Really? Really? So society believes that violence towards women and non-binary people is perfectly acceptable, right? Yeah, which is why we have so many services for female victims of domestic abuse. Yet there are so few services for men. It's not that people don't believe that violence towards men or certain forms of violence towards men can't happen. It's that they don't care. It's a thing called the empathy gap. We see this in media too. We see it in movies and TV shows all the time. Have a look at your typical horror movie, right? Usually, 9 times out of 10, the final person to survive is a female. Now, I've heard feminists say before this is because female life is less valued, which is ludicrous when you think about it. If the main character's life was less valued or unimportant, the audience wouldn't be invested in that person. And if they're not invested in that person, the movie doesn't work. So I don't think it's a coincidence that the vast majority of horror movies have the main female character as the sole survivor at the end. It's because people are more concerned about her safety than a male in that situation. And we also saw this in a recent TV show on Netflix called 13 Reasons Why. If you haven't seen this show, don't bother. Needless to say, there are minor spoilers ahead. I thought the premise in the first episode was kind of interesting. Yeah, but it just went all downhill from there. So once again, spoilers. Not that I think any of you are going to watch it or should watch it, but just in case. The show picks up a week after a girl has committed suicide. I think she was 17. And a very close friend and kind of romantic interest guy is depressed, obviously. He gets home from school and he finds a box of tapes. So 7 tapes with 13 sides with recordings. And each side is a reason why she committed suicide. Some of them are very superficial, like probably the weakest one is a guy published her poem in a school newspaper without her permission. He didn't even put a name on it, so no one knew she wrote it, but, you know. But towards the end, once again, spoilers, she gets raped, and I can understand that being a major factor in why she committed suicide. But some of the other reasons were pretty weak. But the point is, it is a female main character, which is an interesting choice considering the vast majority of suicides are male. So I asked myself while watching this, would the show work with a male character in this role? Would the audience feel the same amount of sympathy? And I have to say the answer is no. I don't think the audience would have connected with the main character in the same way. I think they basically would have said, fucking man up. Just fucking deal with it. Get over it. That's the type of shit we hear all the time. So it's not that society doesn't believe that certain forms of violence can't happen to men. It's that they don't care that it does. And it's not that they think that it's normal and okay for it to happen to women. The exact opposite, in fact. That is their main focus. I mean, try bringing up male victims of domestic abuse to a lot of people, not just feminists, but people in general. They will look at you weird because all they've heard is about female victims. You'll be dismissed, they will make excuses.
Well, the question is, did he deserve that?
On that.
They will look at you like you're fucking crazy. And even if you prove that there are male victims with the stats, with the government statistics, they still won't care in most cases. It's slowly starting to change, I admit, but we still have a long fucking way to go. But, back to the article.
Both these ideas stem from a societal belief in male superiority.
No. If this is about male superiority, then it's something which is being actively promoted by feminists. Like I said early in this video, if you believe that women need domestic violence shelters and men can just cope by going to a homeless shelter, then yeah, you are saying women are inferior and men are superior. And it's fucking feminists who are doing that, if that's your argument. Or you just don't give a shit about the men, which I think is the more likely scenario. It's lack of empathy towards men. Not that they think men are better, just that they think men are less important. Or I should say, men's safety is less important. But let's continue.
So, ultimately, supporting male survivors and supporting female and non-binary survivors go together. Both require us to challenge patriarchy.
No. Not challenge patriarchy, but challenge gynocentrism, which puts women, or I should say women's safety, at the centre of everything. I mean, have a look at this case from late last year.
Woman who treated police like a personal punchbag avoids jail after 11th violent attack. Police have accused magistrates of allowing a shameless single mother to treat police officers like her personal punchbag after she escaped jail for her 11th violent attack on them. Dawn Walker, 34, has a string of convictions for assaulting police during drunken foul-mouthed rampages, including 4 separate incidents upon officers in this year alone. But the unemployed former cleaner, who claims employment support allowance, has repeatedly been spared jail after she insisted she was striving to be a good role model to her 3 children. Earlier in the year she sank her teeth into another policeman's face as she had to be restrained on her car bonnet by several officers. It emerged she would drink 3 bottles of wine every night. At Burnley Magistrates Court, Walker, from Buckup, faced up to 6 months jail after she admitted assaulting police in the execution of their duty and being drunk and disorderly. But JPs said they were suspending the sentence due to her circumstances. Earlier the court was told Walker has a criminal record of 17 offenses going back 16 years, with 10 previous offenses of police assault. The court heard how the bust-up occurred as Walker had been letting her hair down on one of her regular weekend boozing sessions and had rode with her new boyfriend. She claimed to remember nothing about it. But the outburst came just 6 weeks after Walker escaped with a 12-month community order after she attacked PC Thomas Lord as he questioned her for crashing her car in a drunken stupor. During the incident she told PC Lord to fuck off, after he asked her to give a breath test, refused to get out of her Renault Megane, tried to bite and headbutt the officer and made verbal threats. She tore at his cheek, breaking the skin and causing pain. In previous incidents earlier in the year she kicked an officer in the chest and booted another in the shin. When she came out, she turned to alcohol once again as a crutch to get her through day-to-day life. She turns to alcohol to try and hide from the problems she most definitely has. A probation officer speculates her actions when a drink may be an instinctive response to direct instructions from males, arising from her long history of domestic abuse.
Oh, I see. She has a long history of domestic abuse. I wonder if they mean as a victim or a victimizer. Yeah. But anyway, the way I see it, there's 3 possibilities here. The first possibility is she's lying. And this is a very likely possibility considering what you're about to see in a moment. So in other words, she hasn't been a victim of domestic abuse in the past, and she's just using this as an excuse to get out of jail. The second possibility is she's telling the truth, and she has in fact been a victim of domestic abuse in the past, but has never been an abuser. Now, I find this exceptionally hard to believe, considering she has assaulted 11 police officers and has a total of 18 offences. So I assume that at least some of those 7 other offences would have been for violence. With a violent history like that, I find it hard to believe that she has not also been an abuser in a relationship. But once again, more on that in a minute. This isn't the last time she's appeared in the media. The third possibility is that she has been a victim in the past, as well as a victimizer. Now, I think this is probably the most likely scenario. Aaron Pitsey back in the 70s was saying that one of the most common forms of domestic violence is when both partners are violent towards each other, which is kind of understandable if you have two people who come from a violent history, a violent upbringing, and they find each other and they continue being violent towards each other. They repeat the behaviour. It's not a surprise. Of course, she was condemned by feminists for doing this, because in their eyes, it's violence, or domestic violence, is something that men do to women because they want to repress women, or own women, or see them as objects, or... you've heard the whole fucking Duluth thing before. So it's interesting that she played both the single parent card and the victim of domestic abuse card. Now, the thing is, these cards are generally only available for use by female players. If a man said that he had a long history of being a victim of domestic abuse, or that he was a single parent, I don't think the court would give two shits when it came to sentencing. Speaking of sentencing, let's have a listen to what the judge says.
Sentencing bench chairman Mr. Philip Homer told her, "We have to say the bench has not seen a record as poor as this for a long time. The purpose of the sentence is punishment and to protect the public because of the number of offenses. But we can suspend it because of your circumstances. If there are any further offenses of this nature, I cannot see any reason why you would not be sent to custody."
Oh, if there's any further offences of this nature, then there will be consequences. Well, that's more than reasonable, isn't it? I mean, 11 violent, drunken offences against police officers, as well with a previous history of offences. I mean, why not give her another chance? It has to be, the magic number of 12 before there's any consequences, right? We're just going to give you 11 chances, but 12 is too far. 12 is crossing the line, young lady. You don't want to commit that 12th one because that's just too much, right? Ah, fucking hell, seriously. Now look, to be fair, I would say that someone who has committed their first offence, they have no criminal history whatsoever, not so much as a parking ticket, one day goes out and gets drunk and maybe gets into a scuffle of some kind, sure, give them a break. No issue with that, right? A suspended sentence. So if they do commit another act of violence, the original sentence should be triggered and they should have to serve time for both acts. I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable because, sometimes people make mistakes. But seriously? 11 fucking times. And not just a fight with someone when you're drunk. This is against police officers. Headbutting them, biting them, kicking them. But apparently 11 times isn't enough for there to be consequences. It's just incredible. It's just fucking unbelievable. But, she is a single mother and she has a history of domestic violence, so considering the circumstances, apparently 11 times isn't enough. But like I said, this isn't the last time she's appeared in the media or in court. So let's have a look at a story from about a month ago.
Shameless mother jailed after stabbing partner. A shameless mother who dodged a jail sentence despite 11 attacks on police officers has finally gone to prison after stabbing her lover. Dawn Walker, 35, of Buckup, Lancashire, knifed Damien Taylor in a near-fatal attack after drinking as many as 3 bottles of white wine. Jobless Walker has repeatedly avoided prison for attacking officers beating 4 PCs last year alone after convincing judges she was trying to be a good role model to her children. But now Walker, who has a criminal record of 17 offences, has finally been jailed for 5 years and 7 months for wounding. Burnley Crown Court heard her boyfriend Mr. Taylor was found last November lying in a pool of blood with Walker cradling his head pretending to be confused and asking, "What happened?" She claimed a mystery delivery man knifed her lover and fled, but the jury heard after the attack she washed the blade before going to his aid. Jailing her, Judge Ian Leeming pointed out Walker had committed the knifing while serving a suspended sentence for her 11th assault on a police officer. Prosecutor Nigel Booth said, "It was an attack carried out with coldness and callousness. She tried to wash the knife and the blood away and then returned to her victim and pretended to comfort him." Despite stabbing her lover, the pair are still in a relationship, the court heard.
Okay, I want you to imagine this scenario. Imagine there is a guy and he's a violent alcoholic, and through some miracle he has custody of his 3 children. And this violent alcoholic goes out and he assaults police officers 11 times. And somehow, through some miracle, he gets away with it every single time. I know that's hard to believe. I mean, the most likely scenario is they would jail him and take his kids away. But let's, for argument's sake, say that he pulls out the parent card and he pulls out the survivor of domestic abuse card, which in reality the court wouldn't even believe or care about. But let's say, for argument's sake, he pulls these cards and they actually work. And he gets away with it 11 times. He then stabs his female partner in the back and tries to cover up the assault. How do you think the mainstream media would react to this? How do you think society would react to this? And most importantly, how do you think feminists would react to this? I get the feeling this would be used as evidence that toxic masculinity is a problem. Glosswitch, no doubt, would be writing articles about how all fathers are potentially dangerous and men are evil. It would be proof that we live in a patriarchy which devalues female lives, and the evidence put forward would be the fact that this man got away with 11 assaults with no jail time whatsoever. It would be proof positive that females are the oppressed class and that men are inherently evil, or are taught to be evil by society, and we have to change the very nature of masculinity to save our society, etc., etc. You've heard it all before. And of course it would be even worse if the guy was white and, well, with 3 kids, most likely he would also be straight. We would never hear the end of it. Even though it's the acts of one individual, it would be applied to men everywhere. And they'd probably start claiming that he's a men's rights activist as well, just to, have to have that icing on the cake, right, guys? Now, the bottom line is that when it comes to criminal acts, men and women should be treated exactly the same. There should be no difference. We shouldn't have one standard for one gender and one standard for the other. Whether you are convicted and the sentence you get should be based purely on the circumstances of the case and nothing more. Not someone's race, not someone's gender, not someone's sexuality, etc., etc. Now, Susanna Wise would inform us that the fact that women get lesser sentences is because of male superiority and the fact that we see women as weaker beings who need special help because they're weaker. And we can't believe that, women would do evil things because they're too weak or inferior to do it. But men, being superior, are capable of doing, anything apparently. And this is the argument we get when we bring up the sentencing gap. We hear, it's actually sexism against women because women aren't seen as capable, etc., etc. Which is an exceptionally interesting argument, considering there are so many feminists out there who are trying to widen the gap. There are so many feminists out there who are arguing that women should get lesser sentences or no sentences at all. So if women getting lesser sentences or no sentence at all, no conviction at all, is the result of sexism against women and the fact that women are seen as inferior, then that is something that feminism is fucking promoting. And it's these bullshit contradictions that constantly show up in feminism. Because on one hand, they're trying to advocate what's best for women, and in this case, getting lower sentences is the better option. But they can't painted as a privilege because they constantly have to paint women as the downtrodden, oppressed class. And it's a bit hard to do that when people are pointing out privileges that they have. So they have to somehow twist it. So this privilege of getting lesser sentences is somehow seen as another form of oppression, which at exactly the same time is what they're promoting. It's just fucking insane. It really is fucking insane. Well, I was going to try to do the Fathers 1, 2, Part 2, but I ran out of time. So, just to finish up, I thought I would once again slightly touch on the concept of the way that women and men are portrayed in movies and TV shows. So I brought up before that a trope that we often see is the female victim, the lead being a victim, and this is because we tend to have more sympathy towards females. So when they're put in a dangerous situation, we can have empathy towards them, we get invested in the character, and we want to see them survive. But I hear some people saying, but Bane, what about the male action hero? Well, that's a little bit different, because the male action hero is essentially a protector. This is basically a traditional male gender role. Now, an interesting thing I've noticed is that if the main character is in the protector role, he's likely to survive. Not in every single case, obviously, but in most cases, the male protector, if he is the lead, tends to survive because, that way it's easier to make sequels, right? But if the male protector, or the male action hero, is a secondary character, then they're more likely to sacrifice their life. So a good example of this male action hero as the protector is the movie Taken, where we see the lead role as the guy trying to protect or save his female daughter. Another recent example is the latest Mad Max movie. Now, in the protector roles, we have Mad Max and Furiosa. Now, I know Furiosa is a female character, but she is stereotypically a male character. And she really stands out from the other female characters in the movie. If you look at the women that Mad Max and Furiosa are protecting, they are very stereotypical female. And in the context of the story, Furiosa even had a job which males normally have. Now, both Furiosa and Mad Max survived because they're leads. But have a look at the character of, I think his name was Knox, if I remember correctly. He starts out as a bad guy, but, a woman smiles at him at some point and he swaps sides and becomes one of the good guys. He takes on the role of protector, and because he's a secondary character, he sacrifices his life for the women. So here we have a set of tropes. Now, obviously, you'll be able to find exceptions to these. Nonetheless, these are commonly used ideas. So if you have a female lead, she is often in danger and has to protect herself to get out of that danger, and we tend to have empathy for her because she's female. This is used very commonly in horror movies. And then we have the trope of the protector, which is usually male. If he's a lead, he usually survives, not always. If he's a secondary character, though, he's usually killed off or sacrifices his life to save, often, a female character. Now, I don't know if there's any studies which have been done into these tropes, but it would be interesting if there was. Like I said, this is just something I've noticed, but it would be interesting to see how often these are used and in what ways. And it would also be interesting to see the instances where they're flipped or the opposite is true. Anyway, that's just my thoughts on that, and as always, feel free to comment in the comment section below if you agree or disagree or want to add something to it.